I'm Sharon Spurlock, the Senior Director of Family Support at the St. Louis ARC, and I'm actually leading the webinar tonight on Introduction to Charting the Life course. I'm going to offer you an opportunity as we move through the presentation. What I'm hoping to do is to do a presentation about what Charting the Life course is, where it came from, and talk about the principles that really guide our work when we're using Charting the Life course. So I'm going to start off first by just saying that I have been in the field for over 40 years now. I started at the St. Louis ARC immediately after college. And so I've been around for a lot of different new things in our field. And when the Charting the Life course framework was brought to my attention in around 2014, 2015, I got really excited. And I want to spend part of our time tonight talking about why I'm so impressed with the work that's been done to create this framework, why I think that it is a revolutionary opportunity for people with disabilities and for families to really take ownership of planning for their lives, and how we can use it in multiple ways as professionals to help families and help individuals have that great life that they want to. So that's a lot to say, but it's all true for me. So I don't think I put a slide in here for this, so I'm just going to talk through this. But Charting the Life course really came out of a convening of people that work with families who have a family member with a disability, or people who themselves are family members of a person with a disability. And they all came together in 2012 to talk about what is the very best way to provide supports to families. What do families need to feel confident in their decision making, to know how to advocate for their family member and for themselves with systems? How can professionals best provide the supports that families deserve and families need? And so out of that meeting came some ideas, and there was a community of practice formed across 5 states, where there were 5 states that said, look, we want to talk to each other on an ongoing basis and continue the work around developing best practices in supporting families who have at least one member with a disability. And Missouri was one of those. And so our members from Missouri went back to the our University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, and they took the information they got at the Wingspread conference, and they started looking at the different elements of support to families, and they created the framework, which we now call Charting the Life course. So this is a product that really came from Missouri. They took it back to these 5 states and started implementing it with different entities across the states, with their departments of mental health, with their family support providers, with the school districts. And as people started to get excited and adopt these, additional states said, we want in on this too. And so now the community of practice includes 19 states, and there are other states and other countries that are also interested in Charting the Life course and are learning about the framework and how to use it. And so that really explains when I came into it. So in 2014, I got my first overview of Charting the Life course, and I started to see that not only were they putting together this information that was easy to understand, but also quite far-reaching. It was really able to cover a whole lot of different kinds of scenarios. But I could see that they were creating a language that was going to be the same for all people, that we were going to be able to talk to somebody who had a child who had just been diagnosed, and the family would be able to learn this language and this framework from Charting the Life course. And as their child grew and entered the school system, if the schools used this, it would again be the same types of support, the same language, and on into adult services and into the system of case management. And one of the things that's always frustrated me is how hard it is for families to learn the lingo. We have such specialized language about about what we do, that just when you understand what an IEP and due process and a 504 are, then we say, oh, time to switch. We're going to have you now learn about voc rehab and individual support plans, and what's the difference between independent supported living and shared living. And so there's so much language that I think it makes it difficult for people to advocate for themselves. This framework also really looked at what was happening in our support world. And I like this graphic. I want to talk just a minute about these circles, because it kind of it's a really simple but eloquent graphic that describes the evolution of working with people with disabilities. So the circle on the left that's all blue has the person with the disability surrounded by their family members and their community. So this really illustrates what things were like before we really had disability services. Families had a member with a disability. They did their best to provide supports and love them and take care of them. And they engaged them in the community as they saw fit, and the community engaged with them. And it was really kind of up to the family to determine everything that was going to happen with the person. After some legislation and some laws came into place in the 60s and 70s, we started building a service system. People told us what they wanted, and we started creating group homes and day services and employment opportunities and building our skills with special education. And we created this band of services, and we actually called it wraparound services, where we wanted to meet a person's needs and make sure that they were all covered. But what happened is those services were designed in a way that they wedged our professional language, our professional knowledge between the person and their family. And families started to think they maybe professionals knew more than they did. Maybe they needed to step back and step out of the way. And the community was so far away from the person with the disability, they made assumptions that because of all these service systems, that this required a special type of person with special learning and special knowledge to be able to interact with a person with a disability. So while it was great that we developed so many services, we developed them in a way that isolated people from their family and their communities. So as we move into this evolution of services, we don't want to do that anymore. We want to figure out how we can provide services and supports where people need them, in the amounts that they need them, so that they are given everything they need to be successful within their family unit, within their personal life, and also with the community that they're connected to. And Charting the Life course is a really good component of that. So what I'm going to do today is walk through, there's 8 principles within Charting the Life course. And I think it's important for me to spend time talking about that, because most of you are going to be introduced to Charting the Life course with tools, pieces of paper that we say, this is going to help you when you go into this meeting, or this is going to help you think about what you want to have happen next year. But those papers don't really mean anything without the principles behind them. And you don't have to even have those papers if you know the principles. So I'm going to talk about those, but I am going to show you some examples of the papers that go with them. So the very first principle we talk about with Charting the Life course is focusing on all people. And one of the neat things about Charting the Life course is you can use it with anybody. It's being used in the foster care system. It's being used in immigrant populations. I use it with my mother. I use it with myself. Anybody can benefit from following these principles and using this framework. But also it causes us to think about all people. Am I meeting the needs of everybody that might need the services that we offer at the St. Louis ARC? So when I think about this principle, I think about the all. So for example, we're on Facebook today. You don't have to know anything about the St. Louis ARC. You don't have to even have a family member with a disability. You can see my face pop up on Facebook Live and stop and watch and learn about this. So we're making sure that we hit the all, because we know not only that all people can benefit from these resources, but also that there's only a small number of people that are getting those paid services. And that's demonstrated in that tip of the green triangle in the all. most people don't realize that there's only about 25% of people with disabilities that are identified by their states as having a disability. Only 25% of the people that we know have disabilities because of census data are known by the state. So there's a huge group, 75% of the people with disabilities are out there figuring it out on their own. Either they don't know that there's services that they're eligible for, or they don't want them and they're figuring out another way to do it. And of that 25% of people that are known to the state, only 8 to 12% of those people are getting any funded services. So they may get case management, but they're not getting funded services. So I think it's important for us to know that when we're thinking about how to do a good job, we have to think about not just the people that are getting Medicaid waiver funding, but all the people. The second principle is a lovely blue picture of a person within the context of their family. And so we focus in Charting the Life course not only on understanding what the person wants their life to be like and how to best support them, but also that circle of people in their life that is there for them through thick and thin, making sure that those people are part of the conversation because they know a lot of things about the person with a disability and what is important in their lives, and also supporting them, because if those folks aren't getting what they need, the person with the disability is probably also not getting the best quality of life and the best support. So that's a big part of the Charting the Life course process, is making sure that we help connect that person to who they perceive as family, which might be biological family. Some of it might be family that they've created for themselves. It might be a combination of that. But I think we all do our best when we have some key champions in our life that are there for us. The third principle is the trajectory of life across the lifespan. And that's something where Charting the Life course and the St. Louis ARC really come together, because we think it's important that we provide services across the lifespan so that we get to know you as your journey continues, because things happen as you move through different aspects of your life where your needs change and your supports might need to change. And the more we get to know you, the bigger our relationship is, the better we're going to be able to do our job. And so Charting the Life course, it encourages us to look at people across that lifespan and think about what is important to that person as a young child, what's important to that family as a child is entering the school system, what are the things that change and how do we need to evolve what we're doing? What about when your child becomes a teenager and starts to want to take charge of their own life and make some of their own decisions? How do we support that child with self-determination, but also assist the family to look at their role in some different ways, and so on and so forth? So that trajectory is remembering that as we move through those different stages of life, we still want to have a vision in our head of where it is we're going. Because if we don't have a clear idea of what we want next month, what we want next year, what we want when we finish college or retire from a job, it's very hard to get there because you're not making decisions based on a vision for the future. So this is a really big one, and we're going to circle back and do some activities about the trajectory and planning ahead. And anytime that you're planning ahead, you're thinking about achieving life outcomes. So it's not enough to have a vision for the future. You want to be able to achieve your vision. So if my goal for myself is to be able to take a great vacation, I don't want that to be the same vision that sits out there year in and year out and never be able to celebrate success. So having outcomes in my life that I can plan towards, that I can create steps towards success, are all really, really important components of building a great quality of life. This is a chance for me to build my own decision-making skills, be able to build my relationships with people that can help me achieve my outcomes, help me think about economic self-sufficiency, but also community engagement and community inclusion. Where do I fit within the rest of my community? So I'm going to go to the trajectory for just a minute here and talk a little bit about this form, because this is probably the form that you're most likely to be introduced to right away with Charting the Life course. And really, it's about thinking about what you want in your life and also what you don't want, because a lot of times it's very hard to articulate, especially for some folks with disabilities. It's hard to think about what they want their good life to be. So a lot of times we'll start with what do you not want? And people can tell you, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to have somebody else making decisions for me. I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to be working in a job that I hate. So sometimes we start in that zone and think about what it is that I don't want. Sometimes we can talk to people about what they do want in their life. And there's a lot of universal qualities to this. A lot of us want to have really positive, strong relationships in our life. That might mean friends or strong relationships with family. It might mean dating and intimate relationships. You may want to have the ability to have good health and pursue some kind of health goals or nutrition goals. You may want to live in a certain type of house or a certain community. Maybe there's specific people that you'd like to be able to live with. So thinking about that good life and how you might get there. And you can see there's arrows here, and these arrows really are that focal point. There's specific steps that you can take that are going to lead you in the right direction towards your good life. And there may be barriers and obstacles that draw you in the wrong direction. And so when I am talking with our employees that support your family members with disabilities, we talk about if somebody wants to start their own business, what are some of the things that you can do to help them be more successful? Maybe you can help connect them to some opportunities to market a product. Maybe you can help them get to a place where they would be able to sell things that they want to sell. Maybe you can help them learn something new by taking a class. Maybe you can also, though, look at barriers and obstacles that might be in place that would keep them from being able to achieve that vision. And again, if they want to start their own business, maybe there's really practical problems like transportation. What are the things that we need to work on so that transportation doesn't get in our way? Maybe somebody struggles with money management and we need to put some systems in place so that they don't get into trouble and have their money go in the wrong direction. So these arrows are really functional arrows that allow us to think about, what do I need to do? What kind of action do I need to take to go in the right direction? And what do I need to be aware of so that I don't fall off the wrong direction and end up in places that I don't want to be? I guess I wanted to start off by showing you some pictures of folks that are doing their own trajectories in their own ways. I find that with a lot of the people we work with, that writing words is not their preferred method of communication. And so we often use pictures, whether it's in a book or a vision board, pictures that can help you understand what it is they want. And so these are pictures of folks that are sharing what's important in their lives today, but also what are the things that they are wanting to move towards in their future. And the picture on the right, I can tell you this young lady brought this board in to meet with me to talk about some things that she wanted to have happen. And so she could really take ownership about what needed to happen in her future. And then we were able to hear directly from her about the things that were important and start to help plan and offer her resources and supports that way. The Young Man, that's a book that he shares at school about things that are important to him and reminds people like substitute teachers and newer people in his life, what are the things that he wants to be able to engage with every day. This is a new one that I got in the last couple weeks. It's very detailed and it's probably really hard to read, but this is a trajectory for a 7-year-old. Her mom filled it out before the IEP so that she could walk into the IEP meeting. And families often call this paper courage. You know, sometimes the IEP is so overwhelming. You've got all these professionals sitting around and they're required to talk about your child's deficits. And I mean, it just turns into a real bummer of a meeting. And so with Charting the Life course, when somebody walks in with their vision board and starts talking about what they're good at and what they want their future to look like, or if a mom comes in and is able to lay out what's important in her daughter's life for her to have a great first grade experience, it really sets up the tone for the meeting to be much different. And so with this one piece of paper, not only was mom able to talk about what would be really good for her, but also what the things were that they didn't want. They don't want her to be segregated. They don't want her to be unhealthy. So some things to be thinking about that we don't want to make decisions that might put her in unnecessarily restrictive environments. Mom's also been able to share past life experiences that either helped move her in the right direction or caused her to have problems. Some of those things can be things like health problems that maybe drew her in the wrong direction, but they also might be things like low expectations for her daughter to be successful. And then there were things that were really good and really helpful. Exposure to music, homeschooling when there were certain issues with health, making sure that you're involved with family traditions and that you have a really strong sense of that. And then that middle column is sort of mom laying out in advance, this is what we want it to look like as we move forward. I just think this is such a great tool to be able to walk in the door. It's a single piece of paper, so it's very easy for the teacher to reference. And it really helps you explain your family and what's important to them today and in the future. I did want to mention that trajectories can be used for very small periods of time. Ben kind of got nervous about what things were going to be like. And so his family pulled out their trajectory and said, well, what do you want to have happen? And they talked about the fact that they wanted to stay healthy. Not everybody wanted to stay healthy. They wanted to be busy and keep connections with people, continue to work on fitness so that they didn't sit around and become couch potatoes. And so once they identified all those things, they could come back and strategize. If I want to stay healthy, but I can't get to the gym, what can I do? Well, you can walk outdoors. You can learn how to mask and follow social distancing strategies. You can talk to your siblings about other ways that you could exercise at home. So there's lots and lots of strategies on this one piece of paper that can be posted on the wall in the bedroom. So when you start to struggle, you can say, oh yeah, I forgot. I can do this. I can do this so that I move in the direction I want to go. And this final trajectory is really more abstract. It's about thinking about what is technically called anticipatory learning. That as we move through those life stages that I talked about before, there's different things that happen at each stage of life that prepare you for the next stage. So when you're a little kid, you learn how to take turns so that when you get to school, you can take turns with different activities. You learn how to communicate so that you can tell people what you need and what you want. When you're in grade school, maybe you start to take some responsibility at home and clean up your toys around the house. Maybe you start to have friends of your own and learn how to navigate those friendships. Maybe when you're in school, you start to get an allowance and figure out what to do if you spent all of your allowance on candy and now you don't have any money to do the next thing that you want to do. And then when you become a teenager, it just continues to grow. Maybe you start to get up to your own alarm clock or cook a meal once in a while. Maybe you have more work opportunities opportunities and more significant chores to do. But we continue moving through these life experiences that are going to help us get to where we want to go. And so I think this is a really nice illustration about thinking about what are some of the things that my child needs to be able to do to get to the next step on their journey. And that's a nice way to think about the future. Oh, I lied. This, I think, is the last trajectory. This is just for my families out there, because this is for you too. And I really love this trajectory that a mom did about her own self-care journey and what she thought she really needed to do. So I outlined that she wanted to feel rested, eat healthier, meditate, have more time with friends, have a date night, and didn't want to be stressed and guilty all the time. So she lined out up at the top part of the trajectory, what are some things she could do to make that happen? Get some respite support. We can offer that to you at the ARC. Find a walking partner, call a friend for coffee. It doesn't have to be a big to-do. And then, be kinder to yourself. Don't always push yourself to be the best, to always do every single thing that needs to be done. So these are the last 4 principles in Charting the Life course in no specific order. They're all equally important. One of the things that's really helped me to be sure that I'm offering people with disabilities and their families the resources they need is to think about all the different parts of their lives. I think a lot of times when you hit the service system, people provide employment services or they provide leisure services. And so that's what they offer you and that's what they share with you. But all of us need to have big, rich, wonderful lives. So one of the principles of Charting the Life course is to look broadly at our lives and make sure that we're focused on these 6 life domains. And I'm going to talk about each of them briefly. The first is daily life and employment. So that is exactly what it says. It's what is happening every single day. If you're a child, it's your school life and whatever happens at home and in your neighborhood. If you are older, you might be going to work or going to a day program or volunteering, going to college. Everybody's life has some priorities and routines in it. And so daily life and employment is really looking at those components of your life and whether or not you're getting what you need. Community living. Are you living in a home that you feel comfortable in? Are you living with the people you want to live with? Is the environment comfortable? Is it safe? Do you know your neighbors? Are there things in your community that are important for you to connect to? Do you have transportation? All of those are things around community living that we want to make sure we're exploring and looking at. Safety and security. Safety and security is broader than just your own personal safety or public safety. It's also about your security, your financial and legal security. So in this area, we look at your own personal safety. Do you feel safe in your own home? Do you have skills to protect yourself? And when you're in public, do you know safety skills? Can you get around safely? All those kinds of elements. But then we're also, do you have the financial resources to feel comfortable? Do you have legal protections so that you're not taken advantage of? All of those things fall into safety and security and are important to all of us. Healthy living is health as it relates to both physical and mental health. So are you able to do the things you want to do every day? Do you have access to appropriate medical care? Do you have resources to deal with emotional trauma and to cope when there's stress and challenges in your life? All those things are important for us to look at. Social and spirituality. Most of us want to have other people in our lives and want to have some connection to some higher power. And so in this area, we look at the connections that you've got with other people. Do you have people that you care about? Do you have activities that you enjoy doing that provide fulfillment? Do you have that connection to spirituality that gives you a sense of inner peace and joy? And so those are things that are important to consider. And last but not least is advocacy and engagement. And I usually talk about this first because I think it's important to put the person front and center and thinking about, are you able to express yourself and speak up about what's important to you, be able to say no when there's something you don't want to do? Are there things that you care deeply about that you want to be able to be engaged with, either related to your person, to your family, or to the community around you? And all those things fall into advocacy and engagement. So you'll see at the ARC, we'll implement those different domains when we're looking at educating families. We look and make sure that our workshops cover all 6 of these domains. We make sure that we have services that are available in all 6 of these domains, because we know each person needs something different to get their needs met. This next one is supporting the 3 buckets of need. I use this all the time in the family support team, but really the idea is that anytime somebody wants to be able to make a confident decision, you need 3 things. You need discovery and navigation, connection and networking, and goods and services. So I'm going to use an example that hopefully most of us have been through, although it may not be a great experience, and that's buying a car. I had to buy a car during the pandemic, and I'm not a car person. So discovery and navigation is figuring out what's out there. What are the things that I want and don't want? It's really kind of clarifying your vision. So I had to go out and learn a lot about what kind of cars were out there. Did I care about fuel efficiency? Did I want it to be economical? What are the safety features that were important to me? So I used a lot of different ways to gather information about cars and narrow down what I wanted. And then I talked to people. First I talked to people that were really car people to ask them what they thought was important or what cars they thought were really good ones for me to consider. And then once I narrowed down like maybe 2 or 3 cars that I wanted, I talked to people that had those cars and I said, tell me, what do you like about it? What do you not like? Is it what you expected? And got some more information. And then the last step is I had to be able to find the car I wanted. And I'll tell you what, that actually ended up being the hardest part because there was no resources during the pandemic to get a good car. But, having access to a car lot or Carvana or different places where you can physically get a car, you got to be able to get what you need or you haven't had your needs met. So those 3 things I think about all the time when I'm planning. Have I got all those covered when I'm feeling uncomfortable with a decision? The STAR is probably the second most popular tool in the toolbox with Charting the Life course. The idea, this is back to that slide I showed you with the rings of support around a person. This is the idea that we want to provide supports as they're needed and provide them in the best way possible. And a lot of times I think we turn to places like the Department of Mental Health and the St. Louis ARC when there's a gap and say, we need you to provide us with residential services. We need you to provide us with whatever the resource might be. And then that's something sometimes we need to be able to do because that's what you deserve and what you're eligible for. But there's not enough for everybody to get everything. It's just, that's the reality of life. So I think most people are going to be more satisfied and more successful if they use integrated supports. And that means looking at all the different ways you can get your needs met. So that light purple triangle at the top is your personal assets. So what can you bring to the table that's going to be possibly a solution to the problem? When I talk to people about transportation, I'll ask, is it possible to walk any of the places you want to go? What about riding a bike? What about, are you able to read a bus schedule? There's different skills somebody can bring to the table that are going to help them solve their transportation problems. Technical things that can help. There's an app for Uber now. That's a really great resource. You can use the trip planning thing through Metro Metro bus to plan a trip from point A to point B. That's a great piece of technology. Some people even consider headphones that you can put on the Metrolink so nobody bothers you as a technological support for transportation. So there's lots of ways we can look at that pink diamond, which is technology, and see if technology can be a part of the solution. The purple diamond on the right is our relationships. Maybe there's somebody that I can ride share with at my job, or maybe grandma can drive me once a week, or a neighbor. Maybe I can walk, but I can walk with a friend. And so I can get somebody in there to help me. So looking at the relationships in your life and how they might play into it. The dark blue diamond is community. What's available to everybody in the community that I could tap into? And so that would be our Metro bus system or Metrolink, because anybody can use those. There's ride sharing programs that are public ride sharing that anybody can access. TrailNet and all the wonderful network of bicycling paths that continue to be created so that they're accessible and connect you to really places that you need to go. Those are all community resources. And then the green is eligibility. And those are resources that are only available to people that are eligible for them. So it could be disability, could be because you're an employee of a certain company or an alumni or a veteran. So each of us has our own pool of eligibility. So if eligibility with disability is something that I have, maybe I can use Call a Ride, or I can use some of the other private bus services that are only available to people with disabilities. And the last principle, which I won't talk about too much in our meeting tonight, but I do think is important, is transformational policy and systems change. The more that we use these principles, the more people with disabilities and their families tell us about what they want and how they want it delivered. We need to change the system so that it works better for families. And that principle really applies to every one of these things that I talked about. It doesn't really do any good if I am the only one that's applying these principles. So that's why I participate in statewide coalitions that say, hey, we can do a better job with our current guardianship law and providing families with more decision-making information. We can do a better job with case management. Let's provide better tools for the planning process. So all those things are things that we're responsible to do to help change the system. I do want to talk about the integrated supports, which I already went through the 5 areas. I do want to say that when you see this document, the spot in the middle of the star, that's where you really want to put the issue that you want to address, whether it's a goal that you want to pursue or a challenge, a problem that you want to try and resolve. That's the center of your star. So you put that there and then you start strategizing about how you might address it. So I supported somebody once who went and did his star with a group of college students, and his center of his star was that he wanted a girlfriend, and they helped him think of all kinds of ways that he might be able to go out and meet somebody that would be his girlfriend. And he came back and reported and said that he was going to take them up on the idea that he use a relationship and get a wingman. So there would be somebody that would go with him that would talk about how great a boyfriend he would be, and that was going to help him find a partner. I used the integrated support star to choose wedding music because I was going to have a destination wedding and I got stumped as to how to pick out the music I would need. So I went around the circle and realized that I had some resources I hadn't thought about and was able to figure that out. There are already completed stars that are available for you to help you remember. I think about these like a word bank. So when you're looking at a problem, you can say, is there an app for this that would help with this? Is there somebody in my church or somebody on a club or a sports team that I'm on that I could tap into? So just a little reminder to us that these things are out there. This is an activity where we can think about how we use all 5 of these domains to get through our morning. When you get up in the morning, how do you take care of everything you need to do before you leave the house? This is the transportation star that I referenced earlier. So I use this, I send this to families when they're telling me that they're having transportation problems. What are some of the things that are available to all of us? And then I keep adding to it. So I am looking at this now and realize that we now have VIA as part of the metro system. So I need to add that to my transportation star. This is a cheat sheet star for healthy living. If you go to the Charting the Life course webpage, every one of the life domains has a star to help you think about how you can find resources that will help you in that domain. And then the star on the right is really a cool star that was done by a mom to help share with caregivers all the different resources that were available to support her son, who had a significant disability, didn't use words to communicate, needed a lot of medical care. I think this is really cool because she added so many graphics and pictures, and it just has that happy feeling to it, which I think really sets the tone for good support for him. One of the things that I love about Charting the Life course is that everybody's voice is heard, truly as part of that concept of the person in the context of their family. We want to make sure that nobody feels left out, but that we're able to get everybody's perspective. So when you go to look at what's available in terms of the tools, there's a set of tools that are person-centered for the person that we're talking about. And then there's family perspective tools. So if I'm going to try and address change in my life, I would fill out a person-centered tool for myself, but I might invite people from my family and my close friends to fill out a tool so I can get their perspectives too. That can be a really great conversation, because what I think I want sometimes is altered by hearing other people's perspectives, and vice versa. Sometimes my family doesn't realize how important something is to me until they see it. My final thing that I wanted to talk about is just how this is a constantly evolving process. The Charting the Life course community is very active. There's lots and lots of ongoing training opportunities for all people engaged. Some of them are one-time trainings, some of them are multi-dimensional trainings, and there's new things that are created all the time. So here's some examples. This is a portfolio up in the top right corner that says draft on it. And it's a combination of a trajectory, a star, and a one-page profile. That's a nice little packet. And they've had portfolios for a long time in Charting the Life course, but this one is in final draft form. It's an IEP portfolio, so that your child can walk into an IEP with information that talks about not only how great they are and where they want to go, but what are the resources that they already have in their pockets. This information on the left is about Charting My Life course. We really wanted to make sure that all people were able to learn about Charting the Life course. So a self-advocacy series was created with the assistance of the Missouri Developmental Disability Council, and it's available to anybody through their webpage. But it's 3 sessions that are led by a wonderful man with a disability, talking about how to use Charting the Life course to change your own life. So those are available as self-learning tools. We also are using those at the ARC as tools to work with our participants prior to their planning meetings, so that they can have time to think about that. And then last but not least is Life Course Connect. All these documents are great, but creating a pile of documents isn't always like super wonderful for people or for their families. So in conjunction with a company in Canada and a company in Indiana. University of Missouri, Kansas City has created the Life Course Connect products, which include an online template for you to store all your information about yourself and your vision for the future. It's got a dashboard that's got a calendar and a map and some other key information. It includes Quillo Connect, which is a really cool micro learning platform. It's an app with 1-minute videos that tie to the 6 life domains so that you can share videos that represent some of the things that are important for you in your life with other people that are part of your circle. You can create multiple circles of people to share videos with, and you can create your own video content. And I'm going to click through so that you can see this website really quickly here. So lifecourseconnect.com is the website, and there's an opening video with Shelley Reynolds from UMKC. They provide ongoing training and support, but if you click here to learn more about Life Course Online, you can watch a short video that'll show you what the platform looks like and how to use it, which is really cool. There's some information about technical support that's available, other kinds of planning resources. So that's awesome. And then the second piece is Quillo Connect, which will show you how to use Quillo. I found that these videos are really desirable for young families because it's a good way for them to share what their experience having a young child with a disability is with other family members, and also for young adults with disabilities to be able to share content that matches up with their goals with family and friends. The third part of Life Course Connect is navigation, and navigation is St. Louis Arc. So as part of this Life Course Online platform, you can get one-on-one navigation from one of the navigators at the St. Louis Arc. We will help you learn how to get onto the Life Course Online platform, learn how to register and get the Quillo Connect up and loaded into your phone. We can meet with you on a regular basis to help you identify goals and set up your dashboard and do all that fun stuff. And it's a really, really nice opportunity for us. And that's a platform you keep. It's yours to share with other people as you choose. It's paid for through a grant right now, so it's a free resource. I'm going to see if I can click through to this video. And one of the things that I really like, Stacy, that you and Luke were doing is that Luke sends you messages about the work he does with Ashley and previously with Hannah. And then
are you talking about our bi-weekly updates?
Can you talk about that?
So every third or fifth meeting of the month, I send my mom and my transition advisor an update email about what's been going on.
What's that like for you, Stacy, to get those messages from Luke, keeping you informed?
So it allows me to kind of stay in touch with what he's working independently on, specifically with his tasks associated with driving. But then they've also been instrumental in just taking some of the goals that Luke doesn't need mom to direct or whatever, something that they've selected, or Luke has expressed as a desire, next step, to really develop a meaningful way of connecting with him. So he's had some, I can hear them cackling sometimes. So they have fun. It's not all, they're still working their goals, but they make it fun. And I think that that just speaks to the navigation team members over at the St. Louis Arc and their ability to understand who Luke is and what it takes to motivate him. And they challenge him. And he's arriving and delivering. And that hasn't happened too much before these last 10 months that we've spent. I think it's been the impetus for Luke to experience what it feels like to be in charge of his own life, and it is also at the same time an opportunity for me to step back as I should be, and at this time, and start reflecting on how I can more serve as a cheerleader.
So Luke, your mom makes it sound like you seem to be like a little bit different person now that you are using Life Course Online and doing the coaching. How do you think it's affected your life to be able to have these meetings with your mom and Kate, and thinking about the steps that you need to take, and Ashley as well?
Inspiring that I now have the ability to control whichever goals I might achieve. I usually arrange them in top priority order.
What's your top priority right now?
Getting my driver's permit.
Nice. That's going to be really cool. So Luke, I have a question for you. What do you think you want to do with your Life Course Online platform when you go to college? Do you think it's something that you'll continue to use to
I might
set goals?
expand on it and what abilities I could achieve.
So if you take the platform to UMSL, will you invite some of the UMSL staff to be part of your team then? Just
Yes.
one? Yes. I am going to continue and say again, I love that Luke and Stacy found this mechanism to use Charting the Life course and give him control. We meet on Zoom, and so he's the one that's opening his Life Course platform. I can't do it, so I have to sit back and let him take charge. He messages his mom. It's been a really good process for us. That is the end of my presentation. So there's some websites here. If you go to lifecoursetools.com, that's the primary website where you can find each of the individual tools. And there's many, many tools that we didn't walk through today that each can correlate with one or more of the 8 principles. Life Course Connect is the online platform and the Quillo information. And they have a cool Facebook group where you can also go. This is an open Facebook group where you can find out how other people are using the tools. For me, that was a really big thing, is to see how it was being used by other people. It kind of sparked my imagination in different ways that I could use it too.